Now, here's someone I haven't talked about in months. As a matter of fact, the last time I did talk about him, it was more in shame and embarrassment and public humiliation, more so all on his part. And that's Jeffrey Toobin, who, a slight refresher, if you remember last year, he was on a Zoom call with his colleagues and he got caught jerking his Toobin. And we're going to just leave it at that. And, he ended up getting, quote unquote, fired from CNN. Or did he? Because remember, they don't get fired, they get transferred. But this guy got fired, quote unquote, and transferred right back to CNN because according to this article that I'm going to read, he is back at CNN. Now, you got to think, this guy committed an act of public indecency while on the job, while on the clock. And he is a CNN contributor. He's on an international platform where everybody knows his face and knows his name, those who are familiar with him. He doesn't have a small fan base. He has a relatively large fan base. And he did all of that, and he gets his job back. You got black people out here that get fired for way less. And this guy gets his job back after showing his junk on a Zoom call and having a masturbation session. And his excuse was, oh, I thought the camera was off. Or something like that. But the camera wasn't off. Let me go ahead and read this. It says, and this is an article, it says, Jeffrey Toobin CNN return after Zoom call was a class in performative accountability. Jeffrey Toobin's return to CNN as a legal analyst on Thursday was a masterclass in how to evade accountability. The subsequent outrage pointing out the gender double standards at play in the hypocrisy of cancel culture underscores larger societal problems. Toobin got 8 whole minutes of airtime to reframe and retell his now infamous story. In doing so, Toobin demonstrated how culture can work in the service of men, but also how it lacks the institutional apparatuses necessary for effective accountability generally. CNN set the stage by choosing a white woman. The appropriate blend of mainstream feminism for viewers comprised of complicity and appeal to direct Toobin's performance. Anchor Allison Camerata's sequence of questions allowed Toobin to cast himself in his own words as a relatable, flawed human being who makes mistakes. Only a PC person, and in this case a PC male, can say that him pleasuring himself during a Zoom meeting where people could see him doing it when he thought no one was watching can be seen as a mistake. But see, that's the world and the bubble of PC where their mistake for us would be in our case, would be a tragedy or a nightmare. But see, they're allowed to screw up and screw up and screw up some more. And in all of those will be seen as mistakes. A mistake is something that you do, like it's just a mistake. It's something that can be forgivable. That cannot be forgivable, nor can it be forgotten. The logic Toobin employed in this exchange relied on keywords intended to evoke viewer sympathy, and the storyline is full of pathos. First came the acknowledgement of the transgression, carefully framed by self-deprecating language. It was a stupid mistake that was moronic and indefensible. Toobin described the sequence of the deliberate choices that led to a masturbatory act on work call as a mistake, as if it were a random error. Never once did Toobin say these acts were choices, because to do so would be an acknowledgement of deliberate intent over a period of time. He reinforced his language of the mistake by saying he wasn't thinking very well or very much. He is able to say it is indefensible without a hint of hypocrisy because mistakes don't need to be defended. Real accountability in this moment would not only be Toobin using the language of choice, but acknowledging that his deliberate choice to masturbate during a work call was predicated on the assumption that he could take the risk and not face consequences. Yet framed as a mistake, Toobin is able to avoid having to justify his deliberate choices that were calculated on the permissibility and success of risk. Time and again, what is apparent is that people who look like Toobin, white and male and heterosexual, I can tell whoever wrote this is probably, it sounds like a white woman wrote this. So if this sounds like a white woman, it is. And it's an op-ed piece, and there's some points in there, but some of the language and the verbiage that they're using, like the one I just read and the one I almost just read that I'm not going to read, I can tell that it was written by a white woman who probably has some feminist tendencies. She said, are more able to risk not afford it to others. The presumption that accountability doesn't apply reinforces this cycle of power. And cries of cancel culture as a preemptive rhetorical tactic only make accountability more difficult. The irony here is that the people who are in fact canceled rarely seem to be the ones endlessly bleating on about it in various media platforms. On Twitter, people were quick to contrast Toobin's return with the fate of Associated Press news associate Emily Wilder, who was fired in large part for tweeting her support of Palestinians. And of course, perhaps the most egregious example this century is that of Janet Jackson. Not only was she blacklisted after the 2004 Super Bowl halftime wardrobe malfunction, but the man who actually did the deed, Justin Timberlake, faced no consequences at all. The next step in Toobin's masterclass was to validate the rarity of his stupid mistake with supportive evidence. He explained that he'd spoken to several of his former colleagues and that they realized that this was not intended for them. I think they realized there was something I would immediately regret. Toobin claimed he's offering no superficial politician apology, which is I'm sorry if you were offended, but rather a sincere one. In his performative accountability, he knows an apology is simply the first step in the process. He looked directly at the camera as if he were looking into our eyes and explain why his apology is real, as is evidenced by therapy, trying to do some public service, working in a food bank, working on a new book in the Oklahoma City bombing. In no way are volunteering at a food bank and writing a book practices of accountability that repair the harm he has caused or rebuild the trust he has forfeited. Yet Toobin used them to wield the language of crime and punishment and consequences to show he has been held accountable. In response to Camerata's lob of question, Toobin was quick to note that Condé Nast found no other transgression in his 27 years of the company. Then they continued. Toobin claimed he is trying to become the kind of person that people can trust again, but his performance on cable TV indicated he has yet to achieve this beyond skillful rhetoric. A culture of accountability, however, is not the exclusive work of the individual, but of communities, and particularly in this case, the institution of CNN. The network has yet to demonstrate how it has changed its policies or implemented a culture of accountability since Toobin's chosen 8 months leave of absence. The network's own language echoes Toobin's mistake, rhetoric as a way to excuse the need to make system-wide changes. Clearly, our culture has failed to instantiate knowable practices of accountability. Instead, we are served vague and insulting gestures. There is no culture of accountability when offensive and harmful actions are repeatedly written off as stupid mistakes. Like I said, I could tell this is probably written by, like I thought I'm looking at a person named Marcy Bianco. This is cultural critic, so either she's a palm-colored woman or maybe she's some kind of a Latina. I'm not sure, but I could tell that it was some feminist talking points definitely in there. She had some points, but I could definitely tell. I had to skip over a couple things, because but with the accountability part, that's par for the course. I'm not surprised that Jeffrey Toobin is back, but that just shows yet again, PC can do something outlandish and outrageous, such as pleasuring yourself, something that's usually done in private. Like, what the hell was he thinking? Like, doing something like that while it was a Zoom call on? Like, why even risk it? Like, if you had to go and excuse yourself because you want to do that, just do that in another room where no one can see you. Or like close your laptop down or cover it up with something and then go and do it. But you decided to do it right there because you thought it was off and did it right there. Like, you was risking it even if it wasn't on, because it's like he was being a whole exhibitionist at that moment. But they're going to just gloss over it. As you can see, as long as he says it was a mistake, they'll take it and run with it, and he'll be back in no time. Because it sounds like to me he's not all the way back. He was just allowed to come back and just give his take about what happened and everything like that. But them, him chalking it up to as a quote unquote mistake is what's going to most likely get people to try to feel bad for him. And he'll probably get the people over at CNN to feel bad for him. And then before you know it, he'll be back at his old job. And they're going to act like this never happened. It's crazy because I'm going to be honest. I had forgot all about this until him going back on CNN to give his little 8 minutes of whatever came back up. And then that's when it all started to come back. Because a lot of stuff happened since then. But I remember when it happened because I think I did a triple P on it. Because that was an opportunity that was not to be missed, to be petty. And we got a good kick out of it. But the laughing part is over. This just shows you yet again another PC male can do something like this. They'll say, okay, take this much time off. People are going to forget about it. And then we're going to kind of slide you right back on in. And hopefully people won't, come harping down on you. But that's kind of hard to forget. Like, you can't forget something like that. And for those who was on that call, not only can they not forget that, not only can they not forget that, but they can't unsee it either. Like, can you imagine how traumatizing that was for them to see their colleague in that, I guess you can say, in that format? Like, you are going to have to walk up and down the halls and look at this guy and be like, a few months ago, we had to literally get a peep show on a conference call. But yeah, this is America yet again.